Steve with Kraken RC. Today we're going to take a closer look at our HPI Baja Big Bore shock. We're going to go through the assembly process as well as the bleeding of the shock. If you're here just to look how to bleed the shocks, you can skip ahead the video to about 3.5 minutes in. Our HPI Big Bore shocks are patterned after our Kraken Vecta shocks. They are huge with an 8mm shock shaft. The Baja shock features a triple O-ring setup to help seal the oil in. These are an emulsion style shock, meaning that there is no bladder in the top cap. And so at the end of the bleeding process, there will be a small amount of oil that is displaced. And as you cycle the shocks, that air is dispersed through the oil, and that is an emulsion style shock. These are incredible to upgrade your HPI Baja. They will fit the stock suspension arms as well as aftermarket suspension arms and shock towers. So let's dive into the assembly. So we'll begin with a basic overview of the included parts: your shock body, shock caps, your shock shaft guides, your shock seals, O-rings, as well as your shock shaft, 8mm in diameter. There is some washers that go on the top and bottom of the shock piston, as well as a nylon retaining lock nut for the shock piston. You have an O-ring for the cap, as well as a retaining ring that holds that shock cap in place. A plastic parts tree is included. There are some small bushings that are installed at the end there, as well as your shock eyelet. We will show you how to do that. Here's the shock oil. Tools you need: an X-Acto knife, some needle nose pliers, an 8mm wrench, and a rag. We'll begin by assembling the shock shaft. We will put on one of the metal washers, the shock piston, the second metal washer, and then our 8mm lock nut. You're going to use your needle nose pliers and hold the shock shaft in place on the flat spots and use your 8mm wrench to install that piston. The top and lower guide bushings of the shock shaft are directional, so they will have a little groove that seats into the shock body. I begin by putting some oil on the shock shaft to make sure that it is not going to damage anything, and then I will begin installing with the bushings, as you can see with the orientation in this video. Each bushing is followed by an O-ring, followed by a plain bushing, and then another O-ring in suit. The lower guide bushing is again directional, and you'll want to follow the orientation shown in the video. With those installed, you'll then push that into your shock body, and you'll install your lower retaining cap. Some people prefer to use a little bit of thread lock on that lower retaining cap. That's totally optional. I do suggest inspecting them regularly. At this point, we are going to install our shock eyelet and the bushing. So this spacer bushing goes on first, and it's just one that is used. Take your needle nose pliers, hold on to that flat spot, and install that lower shock eyelet. We're now going to begin filling the shock with fluid. Fill your shock oil to about halfway to 3/4. Slowly push the shock shaft in a small amount and then pull it down slowly. This is going to release the air bubbles that are trapped underneath the shock piston. And so you do that a few times just to make sure that there's no air bubbles hiding underneath that shock piston. Install the O-ring into the shock cap. Make sure that it is fully seated. Once that's done, we're going to fill the shock body the rest of the way up, just a little bit below the surface there, the top level. You'll install the cap, and then you'll take your cap retaining ring. I install this all the way, and then back it off about 2 turns. You should have your shock shaft fully extended while you do this. As you loosen the cap 2 full turns, that's going to allow you to bleed the shock out. So some of the oil will be removed as you push the shock shaft in. If you find that no oil is coming out and it's difficult to push in the shaft, you need to just loosen up that cap a little bit more. Just try another half a turn at a time. If you notice that you can see here, some of the oil is starting to come out. This is a bit of a messy job, so that's why we have that shop rag on hand. So you'll continue to slowly push that shock shaft all the way up, and once it is fully into the shock body, you're going to tighten the shock cap. So do that with the shock shaft pushed in. Once you've tightened the cap, you can wipe it off, make sure that the cap is in there tight, and then you can cycle the shock shaft. There should be no resistance as you push the shock all the way in. Push that shock bushing up a small amount just to make it a little bit easier to install the spring cup. You can then cycle the shock. You'll hear a little bit of air, and that's normal because this is an emulsion shock. You can install those on your Baja. I hope that this video was helpful, and we will catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.